Now, the average tourist isn't likely to pitch up in a place like Neu-Isenburg, but the place intrigued me, so I decided to take a look, and here I am. And what I've found is a town that was specifically built to house refugees.
Neu-Isenburg is a small town just south of Frankfurt and right next to the airport. But how this town came to be is an unexpectedly interesting tale. The story begins in 1685 when French Protestants, that is, Huguenots, found themselves being persecuted not for worshipping the wrong god, but for worshipping the right god in the wrong way, and refusing to acknowledge the authority of the king, which was probably what really irritated Louis XIV and led him to ban Protestantism. Unsurprisingly, a lot of Huguenots left France for other countries. Many settled in Switzerland, but that country soon became overwhelmed and alternatives had to be found for them. At the time, Germany existed as the Holy Roman Empire, a large collection of small states, some Protestant, some Catholic, depending on which church the ruler went to. 34 Huguenot families were put in touch with Count John Philip of Isenburg-Offenbach, who sometimes spelled Isenburg with a Y. Because why not? More to the point, he was a Protestant, so glad to help. In 1699, he gave these families some land where they could settle right on the border with land belonging to Frankfurt. His sister's steward would design a town for them to be called Neu-Isenburg in honour of the generous count. All the history books seem to say the refugees themselves gave the town that name out of gratitude, but I'm cynical enough to wonder how much choice they really had. If you take the tram from Frankfurt, it leaves the city and then runs parallel to the railway line towards Darmstadt before veering off into the forest. This is because this line was actually built in 1899 as a railway and then converted into a tramway in 1929. The terminus still has a station house. But here's the weird thing. You haven't technically left Frankfurt yet. The forest you just travelled through belongs to the city of Frankfurt. Almost the first house you come to was built in 1701 as a forester's house by the city of Frankfurt on land belonging to Frankfurt. The oldest house in Neu-Isenburg isn't in Neu-Isenburg. The border is here at these crossroads, and you can spot it because the street names change colour, blue for Frankfurt, white for Neu-Isenburg. This house was built as a customs post, since open borders were still way in the future. But let's talk about the town's street layout, because that is what first intrigued me. The town was built in the shape of a square stuck to the main Frankfurt to Darmstadt road. 8 roads all lead into the middle in a star formation and meet at the marketplace. At the time, architects, landscape gardeners and town planners were fascinated by simple geometric shapes and symmetry. Not for them, the random winding alleyways of the Middle Ages, this was order. Wikipedia claims the streets form 2 crosses as religious symbols, but its source is an essay about a neighbourhood in Potsdam that merely shows a map of Neu-Isenburg without explaining what it has to do with the author's theory. It is true, though, that the church takes a prominent place due north of the market square. It was consecrated in 1775 to replace a temporary building which had lasted an impressive 70 years. Interestingly though, the marketplace wasn't always empty. It's where the original town hall was. Construction began as early as 1702, but by 1871 it was in such bad condition it had to be pulled down, and the town council was forced to relocate, eventually ending up here on the other side of the Frankfurt Road. Anyway, the Huguenot refugees, using materials supplied by the Count, built their homes and settled down. Few of these original buildings survive, and much of what's here was built after the Second World War, leading to some jarring clashes of architectural styles. This is probably one of the most significant of the surviving buildings. It was built in 1704 as a school for Huguenot children, with all the lessons taught in French. The idea was to allow the refugees to continue to practice not just their religion, but their culture, which included speaking French, and that, for a while, was the only language heard in town. It was a home from home, a little piece of France. There wasn't much effort put into helping anyone integrate. It didn't last long, though. At first, the residents lived as farmers, but this caused conflicts with Germans in neighbouring towns and villages as they argued over land use, sometimes even moving boundary stones. In 1731, Emperor Charles VI, who was not known for his tolerance of minorities, put a stop to all the fighting simply by banning the grazing of livestock in the area. Some of the residents turned to traditional Huguenot trades and became weavers, but others moved out. And into the houses they left behind moved Germans, which just increased the Huguenots' frustration. In 1761, it was decreed that the language used in church services was to alternate between French and German, which just angered the French speakers yet again. It took, as it often does, a couple of generations before everyone got along with each other, and in 1829, German was made the official language of Neu-Isenburg. Although it is now, of course, as German a town as any other, its French past is quietly celebrated by the locals. If you know where to look, you can see little flourishes such as this Huguenot cross, the symbol of French Protestantism. And while Neu-Isenburg originally housed refugees, there's an intriguing story of one man who fled away from Neu-Isenburg.
One of the most surprising things that I discovered about Neu-Isenburg is that it's actually the birthplace of Willy Brandt. But surely, Willy Brandt, the former German Chancellor and Nobel Peace Prize winner, was born in Lübeck. And, well, he was, but his name was actually Herbert Frahm. During the Nazi era, he was forced to flee Germany due to his political activities. It was while he was living in exile that he acquired the passport of the real Willy Brandt, also a politician who had also been forced to leave Germany. And so Herbert Frahm assumed the identity of Willy Brandt.
Incidentally, if you're disappointed by the fact that the oldest house in Neu-Isenburg isn't in Neu-Isenburg, there is the House of the Lion from 1702, although until 1918 it was known in French as Au Lion d'Or. It was an inn, but now houses the local museum. That is, the cellar dates from 1702. The rest had to be demolished in 1976 before it fell down of its own accord, so this is a reconstruction. Although Neu-Isenburg does have an S-Bahn station, it's about 2 kilometers away from the historic centre. It's actually more convenient to take the number 17 tram, which runs directly from Frankfurt Central Station roughly every 10 minutes. But if this happens to you, there's also the number 653 bus from Frankfurt Süd, although that only runs once an hour.